Welcome to the Waiting List podcast. Tell us the story.
It's like many things you start building from scratch.
And then I'm like, wait, I really do like watches because
you've seen so many watches that makes you excited.
I think I really do like watches.
Yeah. I think it's a great way to see if you are a watch enthusiast. Welcome back to the Waiting List podcast, where I'm joined by my co-host, the tattoo-adorned co-host Jacqueline, and the heavy cotton-wearing Lung Lung.
What?
So,
What?
you like heavy cottons because you look better. I remember that.
Yeah. Wait, oh, you actually do? Okay.
Yeah. So if you missed the previous episode with Kelvin, I think you should go back and listen to it. Right, guys?
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely one of the ones to listen to, in my opinion, although I'm going to always be biased to my bro. For you that don't know Kelvin, he's the co-founder of Shanghai Watch Gang and Shanghai Watch Festival. So welcome back, Kelvin.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, cool. Right. In this episode, we're going to focus on your watches, or on watches generally. So again, touching on the China thing, back when you were a kid, you kind of mentioned it, they weren't accessible. And in the festival, we did this like San Da Jian. Yeah. What did that mean?
Three big things. Okay.
Yeah, the three big things.
Okay. The three big things. Okay. So so back in the days, or when I say back in the days, we're talking 60s and 70s. During a socialist planned economy, nobody had anything. Everybody's on food stamps. Everybody's living on vouchers. Most people were getting, 30 RMB in a month as wages. So what happens when people want to get married? Right? You got to provide something to show that you can provide to the family. So the three big things is literally men would need to have so that they could get married. And you're not going to believe what these three things are. A sewing machine, so you can make sure that, you have something to be able to make clothes. A watch, you can tell the time, and a bicycle. So those are the three big things. Yeah, I mean, you guys will laugh now, but a watch, a Shanghai watch, back in the 70s, would have been an average person's 4 to 5 month wage.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why I got one.
So in today's term, it would have been somewhere along lines of, let's say, about 100,000 RMB, 80 to 100,000 RMB. That's a lot of money, right? And that is if you had a voucher to buy it at the first place. So if you had to buy somebody's voucher, then you have to add more. Right. So it's like, you can sell the voucher on a great market. So you could technically say that most Shanghai or Seagull were like Nautiluses and steel Daytonas because a lot of them were bought on a great market.
A special watch in your collection, Kelvin, is the Blancpain, right?
Oh, yeah.
What caught your eye for this watch? Yeah. Why did you like this watch? And why is this watch special to you?
Okay. I guess the Blancpain was the first watch that got me into watches because all right. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about the background story. If you guys heard the previous episode, I had a big ups and downs in my professional career, or I guess in my entrepreneurship. And in 2008, I moved back to Shanghai and I started a business, and it was pretty tough. And one of my rituals every weekend was to walk from my little desk, which I rented from a friend's office, back home, right? Because I find walking, and till this day even, walking is a great way to find some clarity, to clear your mind, to actually think things through, right? So I used to walk about 6 kilometers home, and in between I have to take a ferry, by the way. So when I'm walking, I'll always walk past the Swatch building on the Bund, which is on Nanjing Road. And I believe that was when Swatch first officially came into China. under JCB. So they had a Blancpain shop, they had a Omega, and they had a Swatch on the same row. Before that particular time, so before 2009, I thought watches are for old people, right? They're for old men. They're for my dad's generation. I think they're obsolete. Nobody needs a watch. You don't need a watch to tell the time anymore. And every single watch that I saw that people wore, I think Mans series just launched. So, no, sorry, the L Evolution series just launched to replace the Le Mans. And they've got a pretty funky design, right? They weren't that traditional. And I saw this black DLC Super Trofeo chronograph in the window next to a Lamborghini Motocast. And for most of you know, I'm a diehard Lamborghini fan. And I went, oh, that's a pretty good looking watch, right? So I had no idea what this brand was. So I thought to myself, okay, maybe this is some cheap brand or, within reason, a cheap brand. So I went into the store. The store people were very nice. And they spoke to me. They told me, the story of Blancpain, how they never made a quartz watch and they'll never make a quartz watch. I'm like, well, who the fuck cares, right? And I said, can I see that watch? They brought the watch out and I'm looking at it and went, this is a pretty watch. And I put it on, thinking to myself, I could see myself wearing this, even though before that particular time, I think nobody needs a watch. I thought to myself, I could wear this, and it looks good on me. So I asked the guys in the shop and I said, how much is this watch? And to my surprise, they said 140,000 RMB. And before that, I thought Omega and Rolex were the most expensive watches in the world. I mean, I think paying 10,000 US dollars or 10,000 Australian dollars for a watch is obscene. It's crazy. Like, why the F would you pay that kind of money on something that you don't need? And that watch was 3 times that, right? And mind you, like back then, you could probably buy like a living room in Shanghai. So I thought, wow, that's crazy. That is crazy. And then they start telling me, oh, Blancpain is the oldest watch brand in the world. We're the most prestigious brand in the world. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. I cannot afford this. But it put a seed in my head, right? Now, there's two things that came out of this after I left the shop. One, why would people spend money on something that is so obsolete? I mean, that's number one. That's crazy, right? It's not like a car. Like, at least if I drive a car, people can see me driving a car. I could get from A to B, like, shortens the time. Why do you need a watch? And two, when I was flipping the watch over, looking at the open case back and seeing the F1 or 1185 movement, and I went, wow, this is a beautiful movement. The way they blackened it. Just why would you even bother doing something to a movement to make it look pretty? And also, because I love cars, it reminds me of when you pop the hood, right? Because you don't see the case back. You literally have to take the watch off, flip over to see it. So to me, that's like you stop your car and you pop the hood and you open it and you look at it and go, wow, that engine looks amazing. I mean, why would you make the engine look amazing? Because nobody sees it, right? So on my way home, I'm thinking to myself, you know what? Fuck it. If I ever made it, I'm buying that watch. So on my, I think right after I got home, I started going online. I start searching brand, right? Finding out the stories on the brand. And then I start realizing there's a brand called like Patek Philippe. There's a brand called Audemars Piguet. And I think that particular watch was the watch that got me into watches, if that kind of makes sense.
So not long after I met you, you actually started to develop a strong interest in independent brands, in particular Debethune and Urwerk. You didn't really bother with that, like Holy Trinity or Langer. I mean, I know you had an offshore, but you didn't really delve too deep and you went straight to the Indies. What is it about the independence that is so impressionable on you?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with how I got to like watches at the first place. I mean, most people that we know, everybody started with a Rolex. Others don't know Rolex, maybe like Omega, Longines. They move up. So it's a what I say, like a traditional horological path, right? I got into watches because not because of watches itself, because the design really attracts me. I like the design, right? Uh, I like watches that brings out a certain personality, at least a certain personality that I find that is close to me. And so I don't see watches, I guess even till today, I don't see watches as a watch. I see a watch as something part of my personality. It's an extension to my personality, right? And I kind of find myself a bit of a not the usual norm kind of person. I don't really blend in. I don't really fit any into this group identity. So I kind of feel like I'm a bit of an odd one out. And if I'm the odd one out, I kind of like to find watches that has a very distinct personality to it, has a very unique design, a design language that maybe speaks to me, a brand that has a particular story or history that maybe fits somehow my uh, uh, my life or part of my life, especially in my professional career. Some of the hardships that I've went through that could reflect in the brand, that I can relate to. So yeah, stuff like that. And I think this is probably why the indies speaks a lot to me in general, rather than big groups or a lot of these big brands. But I guess to answer the question why specifically Uveck and Debitune is because Uveck has a crazy design. I mean, I think that brand is about as crazy as I am, right? And the design is certainly as crazy as I am. Think outside the box, do outside the box. Don't really care about what other people think or say. Don't really care about the norm. It's not a watch for everybody. It's not a design for everybody. But if you like it, if you understand it, it's something to be super proud of, right? And I guess in a way, Debitune is the same, but they have a certain classiness in it, which I felt Uveck in a lot more ways, probably a little bit more industrial, a little bit more more military kind of look, right? Where Debitune feels a bit more, on the sophisticated side. So both ends of best world.
So how come when you're so design focused, right? How about NBNF? And what do you think of like the more classically designed indies like Kari, Grunfeld, Gribble Forsey, or even Recepi?
Well, I love all of them. I mean, actually, NBNF, I like every single one of them. NBNF fits on my wrist quite well, but I mean, I don't have an NBNF because I kind of don't like. I haven't found one particular watch that speaks to me as close as I felt yet. Kari, Grunfeld are still on the traditional side, so they are very traditional. Global Forsey and Akrivia, again, they're very different watches. Global is crazy design, crazy philosophy, but using very traditional technique, right? Akrivia is very traditional. I mean, I love them, but I wouldn't say that they're not my taste, but I will say that I haven't found one that really speaks to me yet. Even though there's a couple in global I really like. I think that their new sports watch is super cool. That GMT is awesome. Like I would buy any of these old GMTs if I could find a really nice one. Yeah.
So with RM flying the flag for many high-end indies, who do you think is best placed to receive the baton and perhaps be the next big thing?
Oh, everybody asked that question. It will be very difficult for me to answer that question, and I think, okay, I'll give you a very honest opinion. I do not think anybody can become the next RM.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because RM is in a completely different league. It's in its own universe, right? So it's like Rolex. I mean, people say there's two types of watches, Rolex and everything else, right? And now you have another segment, which is called RM, okay? So what RM has done is they're not building a watch. They haven't produced a watch. It's not a watch anymore. So like Rolex, what RM is a status symbol and a liquidatable commodity at the same time. It's seen as money, right? It's like Bitcoin. Now, people always say, as a story, that if you're in a jungle somewhere and you need to flee for your life, if you have a Rolex, that could be taken as money, right? Which means Rolex has liquidity. It has value. It has liquidity. RM is the same. It's money, right? So to be able to seen or to have that status is you need to have a very strong marketing, so that there's a global awareness, the global conscious that there is value, right? So your brand or your branding will have to be super strong so that people at least know who you are, right? So again, that most of the indies, nobody knows who they are, right? So if people don't know who you are, they're not going to know how much you're worth, or even trying to find out how much you're worth because they don't know who you are, right? So that's number one. Number two, you need liquidity, which means you need to have a sustainable production. And I think that number starts somewhere around 2,000 to 3,000 watches a year at least. But most indies are making 150, 300, 500 watches. Where are you going to have liquidity?
How many does RM produce?
Oh, something like 6,000 watches a year or something like that.
Wow.
But they have a lot of SKUs. So after you divide them up, watches per SKU they make every year is not much, right? But again, you need to have enough productions or a sustainable production so that there's enough of them on the market, right?
Moving around in their own economy.
Exactly. And the last thing you need, unfortunately, I know a lot of brands don't like to hear this, is you need to have a very strong secondary market, right? Which means people are seeing it as an investment. Now, if I'm buying a watch, and like I said before, if you're basically buying a watch, you're only speaking to people who's interested in buying a watch, which is not many, right? Now, like Francois from AP would say, we're only targeting the top 1% of humanity, right? Because Swiss watch industry doesn't produce that many watches a year anyway. So if we're only targeting the 1%, the demand should way oversupply, right? But the thing is, how many people actually want to wear a watch? And that's a problem. It's not like the industry is trying to promote watches. The industry is trying to promote luxury, which is wrong. Well, in my opinion, it's wrong. And and two, brands are still talking watches as if they are an investment. Stop talking about watches as an investment. They're not, right? But if the entire industry is telling clients, oh, this is a great investment, guess what? Your clients will only go out and buy watches that they can make money off, right? So I think that's it. So you have to have a strong brand image. You have to have a well-controlled supply. So you have demand and you have supply, and you have a very strong, great market that could shift the product and make the market think it's a potential investment. How many brands that you guys see that has that? None. So I don't think there will be a second RM.
Okay. Moving on. I'd like to know which piece in your collection is your favorite right now.
Okay. It's going to get a lot of hate, but, I really would like to tell you that it will be one of the Uber or Bethlehem, which I love all of them, right? But I have this particular watch that sits right in front of me, and I'll say this is my favorite watch.
Can you show us?
I can't show you, but I'll tell you right now, and I'll actually put on my Instagram. It's my 7th Friday.
Okay.
It's my 7th Friday, and I'll tell you why it's a 7th Friday, right? It's cheap. It cost me like $900 Australian back in 2011 when I bought it. It was the first watch that I bought with my own money. Okay. So it has some sort of sentimental value to it. So I guess I am a little biased. But for $900, you've bought a watch that has a pretty cool design. I haven't serviced it in like 10 years. It runs. You wind it, it will run. And it's reasonably on time. I've never tested it. I don't really care. I mean, some people say, oh, it's 30 seconds off every day. Who cares? Seriously, what the fuck cares? You've got a problem if you think 30 seconds or even 2 minutes a day is like a big issue. It's like, oh my God, I cannot believe my Omega is running 2 minutes a day, like slower or faster. Like, who cares? You really wear that watch that often that you really need your watch to tell the time, like so much on dot. Like, are you some sort of train conductor or something? I don't get it. Like, I think some people, like, honestly, I think people's got an unrealistic expectation of a lot of stuff that they have in life. I think this is a great example, right? But, as a watch that I could wear casually, I think it looks cool. I don't really need people to look at it and go, whoa, you got a Nautilus. That is so fucking awesome. I don't need that, right? It fits most of my clothing. So I think that's my favorite watch. But as a watch, but as a statement piece, of course, I could tell you all of my other watches. Every watch that I have, I love, right? But if you're going to tell me like which one would be my favorite, of course that, because I don't need to worry about maintenance or that sort of crap, right?
But we touched on your Blancpain that you got and why it was special to you, how you saw it, what got you into watches. Yeah. When did you get that watch? And how did you get that watch?
Okay. So all right. Okay. Actually, I probably should say that was my favorite watch, but I didn't want to say it because I have to go into a hypothetical mode again.
There's a hypothetical story. Is good.
It's a hypothetical story. Okay. So I one day I was browsing Chrono 24 and I saw a slightly used or advertised slightly used Blancpain online. But that watch happens to be in England, in the UK. So I asked Dan, I said, look, I'm going to buy this watch. Can you pay in pounds and I'll give you RMB. And he said, yeah, no problem, just sort it out. So I thought to myself, it's a secondhand watch. It didn't cost that much money. It's a watch that I always wanted it. So let's just freight it to China, right? Because, it's like, it'd be almost like, me sending my watch from Australia to China, right? So this is something that hypothetically, if anybody is listening and you want to ship a watch to another country, this is something that you got to learn, right? Specifically China. And if you guys are thinking of doing business in China, dealing secondhand watches, you really have to listen to this hypothetical question. Oh, no, sorry. This hypothetical story. Okay. So hypothetically, I got Dan to send this watch from the UK to China through a logistic company, which I'm not going to name. Okay. Because it is a hypothetical story. So I've been looking at the tracking thing, left UK, got to somewhere, got to Shanghai. And I've been like waiting for them to deliver to my door, right? Day 1, nothing. Day 2, nothing. Day 3, I waited for like 2 weeks. I'm like, what the fuck is it still sitting in that logistic company's warehouse? Doesn't make sense. Called them up. Oh, sorry, it's in the warehouse. We're doing. Like, what the fuck is still there? Again, guys, this is a hypothetical story. And then they called me up one day and said, look, the customs has got your watch. They need you to provide paperwork. I'm like, what paperwork? So I'll call the custom up and the custom says, you know that you cannot import a watch into China, right? I'm like, what do you mean? It's my watch, right? It's a secondhand watch. It's my watch. And they said, no, any watch that comes into China needs to be declared and you need to pay a 50% duty on the watch. Now,
50?
This is 50% duty. Now, this is, mind you, this is after I told the sales clerk, take the price tag off. And they found the price tag on the watch. And they're like, no, don't lie to us that this is your watch that you brought it in. You've bought that watch and brought it in. I'm like, fuck. Okay, what am I going to do, right? So hypothetically, what one would do after such a situation like that, you have to make up paperwork to show that you actually own this watch for like 10 years. And to prove that it's a secondhand watch. So I brought all these paperwork down.
Hypothetically, you might have to get your friend to do that, called Dan. To get all the logos right.
Hypothetically, yes, hypothetically.
Yeah, I think you'd need somebody quite good with Adobe Illustrator for that. So if you ever wanted to do that, you might have to do that. Yeah.
Correct. So I brought all the paperwork down to the Chinese customs. And they said, yeah, mate, do you know how many of these fake paperwork that we see every day? I'm like, fuck me. Come on, man, just cut me a break here, right? You know what I mean? I'm like, look, dude, I don't know about your policy. It's the first time I've ever done something like this. I'm not dumb enough to do something that I know is illegal, right? But I guess being a local Shanghainese, or I can speak Shanghainese and the guy Shanghainese, I've been talking to him. He's like, all right, I'll tell you what. If it's under 10,000 RMB, I'll let you go off the hook. And I'm like, how the fuck am I going to prove this? Right? So, all right. So I jumped on eBay. Hypothetically, I jumped on eBay and I typed in Blancpain chronograph. And then I hit the sorting from the lowest to the highest. And the first one popped up was $1,200. And then, watches, they all look similar enough. So I showed them, I said, look at this, right? It's only $1,200. It's secondhand. It's almost the same. And this is a gold watch. Mine's some, steel black fucking piece of shit. And he's like, oh, are they that cheap? I'm like, it's a secondhand watch. But obviously what he didn't realize was it says start bidding at 1,200, right? So he said, okay, I'll give you a choice. You can send it back to UK or you can send it anywhere else. I'll lay you off with a warning. So I said, oh, how about this? Send it back to Hong Kong. So send it to Dan's place. And then, next time I go to Hong Kong, I'll go pick it up. I said, okay, no problem. So I had to do all the paperwork again, where it is going to Hong Kong. So after I've done that, again, this is where the hypothetical story really starts. I waited for about 2 months for this watch to clear from the customs to go to Hong Kong. And then I call every second week. I'm like, what the F is going on with my watch? Oh yeah, it's going soon. It's going tomorrow. It's like tomorrow. Every time I call, it's tomorrow, right? It's like that song, tomorrow, tomorrow. Fucking. So one day I had enough. I'm like, look, dude, where the F is my watch? And they said, oh, no, I promise it's leaving tomorrow. And just happens, I had a friend of mine. So a friend of my wife wants to buy a present for her husband, wants to buy a watch for her husband, and said, what do you think will be a great watch within that budget? So I asked a dealer friend of mine. I said, look, how about just send me a couple of photos, okay? And I can forward to my friend. So my friend sent me like 10 of photos. On one of the photo, I saw a Super Trofeo like mine, and I said, no, look, how much is that? And she said a price, and I said, wow, that's a pretty good price. Like, I paid slightly more, but I think that's a pretty good deal. So I said, why don't you send me a few more photos? I'll get my friend to buy that watch, because I just bought one. And she said, oh, okay. So she actually said, this is right in my hands. So she took a little video, and I opened the file up, and I was looking at the video, and as she turns over, shows the serial number, because they are limited to 300 units. And I'm looking at her, man, that's my fucking watch. That's my fucking serial number, right? So I called her up straight away, and I said, hang on a minute. Are you telling me that particular watch is in your hands? She's like, yeah. I said, is the serial number this? She said, yes. I said, that's my fucking watch. And she obviously had no idea. She's like, oh, when did you sell it? I'm like, I never sold it. It's supposed to be in this logistics company's warehouse. So somebody stole that watch out of the warehouse, hypothetically, and sold it. And this is why that watch has never left the warehouse in 2 months. So, okay. I went nuts. I went fucking ballistic, right? I hang up the phone. I called up that particular logistic company, and I said, where's my watch? And they say, oh, it's leaving today. I'm like, no, it's not. It's in a dealer's hands. Somebody in your company stole it and sold it. I even know who's got it, right? I'm going to sue the ass off you guys. So anyway, they said, oh, we'll find out, blah, blah, blah. So about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 of their senior VPs called me on a conference call, start grilling me on where this watch is. And I said, didn't you tell me that it's in a warehouse? What the fuck are you asking me where my watch is? And they said, oh, yeah, well, the thing is, we've been trying to find it for like a month and a half. We couldn't find it. We found a box, but we couldn't find the watch. So they've already notified the police. Right now, back then, I didn't want my friends to get into trouble because obviously she had bought stolen goods, right? So I said to my friend, I said, look, somebody stole my watch, stole it to you. So why don't you give it back to whoever you bought it from? Get your money back, right? Get your ass covered, and then let the police deal with the matter. So long story short, hypothetically, the logistic company gave me back the money for the watch, and they must have dealt with insurance or whatever. So I got my money back. But the thing is, I'm still pissed off. Like, I want my watch. I waited like 3 months, 4 months for this fucking shitty story, right? So anyway, I called my friend up and said, do you still have the watch? Because I thought they don't have the box. They just have the watch. I got my money back. Well, why don't I offer you a good price and just I'll buy the watch off. And she said, no. I did exactly what you said. I gave it back to the guy who sold it to me. So I said, okay, well, why don't you give me like that guy's number? I'll call him whether if he still has the watch. So she gave me some guy's contact and goes, oh yeah, my guy says he bought it off a guy who bought it off that guy. So I'm like, okay, I added him. And then once he approved my friend request on WeChat, I said, do you still have the Blancpain? He goes, who are you? I'm like, what do you mean, who am I? What the fuck you care who I am? Like, where's the watch? Do you still have it? Because I was literally going to tell him that if you have it, I'll buy it off you. But let's just negotiate at a good price. And the second thing he said to me is, are you the police? And I went, mate, if I'm the police, I wouldn't be calling you. I'll be at your house, right? Because I know your number, right? So obviously I'll be at your house. And then again, like literally the next sentence, I would have been like, just give me a quote. If I'm happy, I'll buy it. because I don't want to go through another hoop of buying another one from overseas. And he started.
Where was this guy?
Oh, he was in Shanghai. Like, so he started giving me, hypothetically, this sob story on how this is the first time he's done it. His wife just left him. He's got a kid to look after. And so I was like, oh, so you're the one who stole my watch, right? So I said, look, dude, just do the right thing. Do the right thing. I'm not going to report you. He says, okay, I'll meet you, one night or one day. Just name a place. We'll meet somewhere. We'll figure this out. I said, okay, no problem. So I met the guy up like after a week, and he gave my watch back. He gave it to me, and he says, yeah, thank you for not notifying the police. And I told him, I said, look, man, I'm not a snitch, but you did the right thing. So hypothetically, I got myself. So the watch that I always wanted, I got it for free.
It's a very great hypothetical dream story.
Dream story.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
I
always have these dreams. I don't know.
Yeah. But how did
how would the guy?
So obviously what had happened is you have a lot of these people, some businesses, some just people who don't know how the law works, is that they think they could buy a secondhand watch and send it to China as a private goods without getting taxed. Okay. Then what they found out is they're either getting a massive tax bill and an M plus penalty. And if it's over a certain price, they might even go to jail. So what they do is, I don't want the watch anymore. Right. So they will basically tell the customs, look, it's not my watch. Somebody put my name and address on it. It's not my watch. I don't want it. Okay. So it becomes unwanted goods. Now, if it's unwanted goods, it's technically owned by the customs. But because it's in the logistic company's warehouse, they have to do a lot of paperwork so that the customs confiscate that watch. Okay. But in that transitional period of nobody knows what the F is going on, if you know exactly where it is, you can bring it out. You could sell it and nobody cares.
Actually, those watches that are actually held by customs, like you said, confiscated, so to speak. What happens to them?
Oh, they get auctioned.
Yeah.
So after a certain amount of time, they get auctioned.
So can you pick up some good deals? And are they marked as stolen, or what are they marked as?
Yeah, no, could be. No, they're actually marked as confiscated. So it's owned by the government agency. But whether if they were stolen or whether if they illegally imported or whatever, right? That information is classified, but you only know it as like a government auction. But I think right now they work with with Alibaba. So Ali Auction. I think most auctions are from government agencies are done through Ali Auction nowadays.
So Ali Auction to find some good deals.
I don't think you will find that great of a deal sometimes, because I know for a fact there were a few fake Pateks being auctioned off Ali Auction. And the thing is, like, anybody who knows a little bit about watches will know that's a fake watch. And people still pay like 70,000-80,000 RMB for a fake watch.
Right.
But that's another story.
But you're so full of these hypothetical stories. You should actually write a book on hypothetical stories or something. Yeah.
Maybe one day.
There is another hypothetical story. Probably not as jingtai, so not as stunning, which is the Urwerk 110. Can you make a story out of the Urwerk 110? If you were to buy that piece?
That's not much of a great story. I mean, I always wanted to have an Urwerk, and my dream piece back then was a 110. And I think Iron Man had just so Spider-Man had just came out, and RDJ was wearing a 110. So I said, you know what? I knew it. I should have had that watch. So I put the word out and I said, look, whoever's got a 110, I'll buy it. And I had a dealer friend of mine call me up one night and said, oh, I've got a perfect watch for you. It's almost brand new. You should buy it. And I went, oh, okay. How much? Gave me a price. I thought it was a bit much, but considering it was like almost brand new, why not? Right? Why not? And I said, okay, how do we do the deal? Right? Because after that whole thing with the Blancpain, like you're not gonna fucking send it through, right? So somebody will have to bring it to Hong Kong. I'll go to Hong Kong. I'll pick it up. Or we work something out. And then he says, no. The seller is pretty pedantic. You have to go to the seller to buy. I'm like, oh, okay. Where's a seller? Now, out of all these places, it's Israel, right?
Yeah.
And I went, get the F out. I'm not flying to Israel to pick up a watch. Like, I love the watch, but I kind of still want to be alive. Now again, this is, I just want to put in there that do not believe what you see on the news. If you want to really know about a place, go there. I can tell you right now, Israel is probably the safest place on earth. Well, compared to Shanghai, it's about as safe as Shanghai, and the people are super nice. I don't know what people are talking about, right? Like people in Israel are actually very friendly people, very nice and friendly people, and the place is safe as hell. But the story is great. So I was struggling because out of everything that you read in the media, you're like, really? People's gonna blow you up, right? So I thought, if I was gonna die in glory, I gotta bring someone with me. So I asked Dan, and I said, Dan, would you like to come to Israel with me to pick up a watch? And he says, no. And he said, no.
I said, no,
okay.
fuck off.
So I said, obviously being brainwashed by CNN, all that sort of crap. And I thought, well, I don't want to die alone. I got to bring somebody with me. So I called up a childhood friend of mine, and I said, oh, look, I'm flying to Israel. Would you like to come? Within about 20 seconds, he says, yeah, when? And I said, in about two days. He goes, hey, all right, come to Hong Kong. We'll go together. So I've flown from Shanghai to Hong Kong. I picked up my friend, and we've flown to Israel. Right. And I had no idea what to expect besides I'm going to pick up a watch. And when we arrived in Israel, the seller's servant came to pick us up. I was the seller's friend. I would down drop the story a little bit. This friend picked us up. We drove from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem for the night because that's when I was going to pick up the watch. So along the way, I mean, look, it's a beautiful country, right? I mean, Israel, I think everybody, there's a couple of places that you have to go. Israel is definitely one of these places that you have to go before you die, all right? But along the way, I was talking to the guy, and the guy's like, look, Israel's super safe, super safe. It's great. It's a great country. And while he's saying that, I'm driving on this one particular freeway. I see this one tank being blown up, like right on the side of the freeway. There's one other Jeep that's been blown up, like burnt down. I'm like, really? Are you saying it's really safe? He goes, yeah, every now and then there's like a rocket flying over. But, we've got a great missile defense system. I'm like, okay, great. But I stayed there for 4 nights. And I have to say it's a great country. But I met the owner.
Is the owner Israeli or Chinese?
No, Israeli.
So
Israeli.
how did your dealer friend find this Israeli man?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting.
Okay, so that watch originally was bought by some Russian oligarch, right? It was bought from a dealer in the Ukraine, and I think he paid full price for it, which was 140,000 euro or something like that. When it was new. And he had that watch and he wore it quite a bit for about a year before Putin has put him on some sort of a blacklist. So he had to sell the watch, right? So basically, like one night he had to liquidate like all these watches and cars and that sort of stuff. I mean, this is the alleged story. Anyway, everything's hypothetical these days. And sold it to this gentleman in Israel, right? And when he bought it, he was literally like looking at the photo and said, "This is a pretty cool looking watch. Never seen anything like this." But if you've seen his collection, which is a collection of hundreds and hundreds of watches, not they're all gold traditional watches. So this is not really him, right? So I bought the watch in Israel, and I had a really great time there. And I have to say, I look forward to going back again. But I also would like to tell a little side story on my Israel trip. Okay, and this is something that if you guys are ever going to Israel, you have to take notice of. So,
before you tell this story, did you have enough opportunities to sample the delights of Israel, the many delights of Israel?
Oh, I'm not
What
going to
does
say
that
that.
mean, Dad?
Jeez,
A lot of the local delicacies.
No,
a lot of the food.
Yeah,
I know exactly
that's
what you're
you
referring
mean.
to. I'm not even going to make a hypothetical story out of that. Okay. So anyway, my father's family is Christian, so I grew up in a Christian family. So I grew up reading Bibles and stuff. And I got to Jerusalem. We did the old city. I absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. So second day, morning, we woke up. My friend and I, we drove all the way down to the Dead Sea. Right, so we checked out Dead Sea, and then we still got like two days to burn. So my friend said, "Okay, so last night, so the day before we went to see where Christ died. How about let's drive to Bethlehem, to where Christ was born. Let's check that place out." We go, "Yeah, sure, let's go." So we Google mapped it. We drove from the Dead Sea all the way to Bethlehem, and it was like, no matter how the navigation told you, like the road just doesn't exist. You go somewhere, it tells you turn left, there's a wall, and you go around, you did a U-turn, you turn right, there's a wall. I'm like, what the hell, right? Like Google Map doesn't work in Israel, but it's been working pretty fine all the way from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. So we saw some soldiers standing on an intersection, and I said, "Look, guys, how do I get to Bethlehem?" He goes, "Oh, left, right, straight down to the end of the road, turn left, and you see the border, and there's yours." I said, "Okay, no problem." And I went there. Now, mind you, I had no, it didn't hit my head about the idea of a border, right? Because I didn't realize Google does not treat Palestine as a country. So if you go on Google Map, Palestine does not exist. Okay. So anyway, I drove through. We followed the map. We did all the tours in Bethlehem. We had like a really late lunch. Did some shisha. So we decided, all right, it's time to hit back to Tel Aviv. All right, get ready for the party, for the night. As we're driving out, again, we couldn't find a way to go back to the main highway, right? Because there's a wall. Like everywhere we go, there's a wall. I'm like, what the F is going on? So eventually, my friend had enough. He said, "Look, just find a taxi, ask the guy where to go." So there's a taxi pool next to us, and we said, "Look, we want to get back to Jerusalem. Which way to go?" He goes, "Oh, left, right, straight, take a right, and then you see the border." I'm like, "Okay." And I'm like, again, why does it say border? Right? And then I start looking at the number plates in front of us. I'm like, wait a minute. I think yesterday it was like all Hebrew, and now it's all Arabic. And then it hit us, we're in Palestine, right? Which, again, I don't want to be racial or anything, but the moment we hit in Bethlehem, like I was telling my friend, I'm like, this place looks really run down, like really run down. Like it felt like the ghetto, right? Now, again, like, I'm not saying anything wrong with Palestinians. Like we were touring there for like a whole morning. Well, everybody's quite nice. But now, here's what it is, right? Finally, we got to the border, and I could see soldiers, I could see snipers at the top. And then there was a bus in front of us. So both of us had our windows down, right? And then I saw these two kids flanking us from the sides, from both sides. And they come in and goes, oh, where you guys from? Blah, blah, blah. And while they're asking us questions, they're asking us for money. I'm like, look, kids, we don't have money. And they were literally trying to open our rear passenger doors to try and get our luggage. So they were robbing us. And then in the rearview mirror, I could see two adults standing on the road, looking at it. Like, obviously they're managing the, kids robbing people. The whole thing went on for like 10 minutes because the bus wasn't moving. And they're trying to get us to leave the car to see that, there's something wrong with our tires. I'm like, come on, kids. I saw that shit in Guangzhou like 10 years ago. That shit's been pulled like too many times in China, right? So at the end, I saw that bus moving, and I was gunning for the border, and everything just happened in slow motion because the soldiers were lifting like their machine guns at us, right? But I kind of think two Asian-looking faces were pretty easy to tell, even from a distance. So they were quite friendly, and they're like, oh, where you guys from? So I said, Australia, but I'm Chinese. My friend's like, yeah, I'm from China. I'm Chinese, I'm from Hong Kong. And I said, oh, welcome, because Israel's quite welcoming to Chinese. So, oh, thank you. And we drove off. And for about half an hour, my friend and I didn't speak to each other because it was really a scary experience. We really thought, we were going to die from this particular robbery because you had all these kids flanking you, trying to get you out of the car. And then you have adults like waiting on the side. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to die in Palestine. But but every now and then I think if I was wearing a gold Rolex, maybe my arm would have been torn off or chopped off or something like that. I don't know. So thank God I was wearing Uvek.
Right. Just again, we'll go back to the main interview now after those hypothetical stories. I wanted to again go back to China. How do you see like the watch landscape changing in China now with like Hainan, the developments of Hainan, and also what's your take on vintage, the interest in vintage watches? Will that take hold in China?
Well, I think a lot of people have some over expectations for Hainan, right? Which okay, I'll lay the groundwork out for people. Hainan, even though it's a free port, there's a lot of stuff ain't that free. So let's say, for example, watches. Okay, duty-free watches are only for watches that's up to 100,000 RMB. They're duty-free. Okay, but you got to understand there's three types of taxes in China. It's not just import duty. So you have right now it's 13% import duty on Swiss watches. That number will eventually go down to 7%. I think it's because China and Switzerland has free trade agreement, which eventually they will lower the import tax to 7% over, if I remember correctly, like over a course of 5 or 6 years or something like that. So you have import duty, and then on top of import duty, you have the VAT, right? And the VAT right now is 13%. It used to be 17%, but it's dropped to 13%, right? And most of the time, VAT is non-waivable, right? So I'm saying 99.9% of the time that is not waivable. And then on top of that 13%, you have you have a 20% luxury tax. So it's a consumption tax, which means it's a luxury tax. So for watches that's over 10,000 RMB, you have a 20% luxury tax. So you have 13, 13, 20. And this is how the entire tax bracket works. Now, in Hainan, you only have the import duty taken out. Mm-hmm. So how much is that really cheapened by? Not all that much, right? And then you got to worry about in about 3 or 4 years' time, when they close off the island, legislation might change again, right? So that some of these privileges might only for the people who's on the island or who is residents on that island. So right now, I would say for the time being, Hainan is booming is because there is, there is some sort of tax-free or duty-free legislation there. But most importantly, it's because Chinese can't travel out. They can't go overseas. Hainan is like the only place that they can go, right? And they can do their shopping. So I think for watches, don't people shouldn't have too much expectations. I think it's great for cosmetics and bags and clothing and the sort of stuff, but for watches, I don't have that great of But talking about vintage watches, right? I think there is a genuine interest in vintage watches in China because Chinese like vintage things. They like old things because old things, it seems to somehow equal to knowledge and prestige, right? But here's the thing. When you're talking about old vintage watches, what are we talking about? How old do they get to be? Are we talking about pocket watches? I mean, that's vintage watches, right? Or are we talking about like watches made in 40s, 30s, 40s? Or we're talking about like vintage Rolex, 50s, 60s? If you're talking about 50s and 60s watches, to a watch might have been like, oh, gee, that's a pretty old watch. But to Chinese, like 50s and 60s, that's when Chinese are the poorest, right? Historically, I don't really think people will relate that period of time as a happy period of time.
Right.
When the Europeans looking at 50s and 60s, they're the greatest days.
Yeah.
Right. If you look 60s. At some of the greatest races, right? The hippies, the swinging parties, the drugs and the sex and all that sort of crazy stuff that's happening post-war. This is the booming days, the glory days, the Chinese. Most of these history, they want to forget. So time period-wise, I don't think it works. 2, it's not really old enough. We're not talking about things that's made in, Queen Victoria period, right? If I spend $1 million on a vintage Rolex, and I go into someone and I said, look, this is vintage, and that guy takes out like a vintage J from Han Dynasty that probably cost around the same amount of money. That's 2,000 years old. You know what I mean? Like, what are you going to compare? Compare history? So, I think what the industry needs to do is to go through a new renaissance to tell people that watch still matters, and then go back into the history and say why some of these watches matters or why some of these periods matters. But otherwise, trying to just convince people, or Chinese people specifically, that vintage watch is great. Chinese will tell you no, that the latest is the greatest.
What is the fascination with Chinese or previously fascination with new goods? Why does it always have to be new? Why is there a particular reason for that?
Well, I don't think it's a Chinese thing. I think it's human nature.
No, I think it is.
New things
like
is always
thing.
Oh no. I'll say it like this, right? I'll say it like this. Why wouldn't people like new things?
I know.
Do you know what I mean? Like.
So I think the reason is the same then. People wouldn't like new things if they're too expensive, right? And they make a cost comparison to something that is potentially secondhand can still do it, but then the cost of the secondhand is quite significantly lower. I mean, most people will consider secondhand, but they won't consider it if it's basically priced the same as firsthand. But if it's like a tenth of the price and it does what you need it to do, then I think they would. It's a price thing, I think. So at a certain price, you will consider it.
No. I think it is. Look, I agree with you. I agree on that. But I think we're talking about two subjects. So what you're talking about is, if I had the choice, would I buy something new, or would I look at the value and buy something secondhand? Right. So it's a value proposition. But what I'm talking about is a cultural mentality that is saying that the latest is the greatest. The latest generation of anything is always the best. Because if you believe evolution, that should be the best. Right. So if I'm buying a car, the latest evolution of any model should be the greatest.
Yeah.
The ideology, at least, because there's better technology, right? There is bigger horsepower. There's a lot of things, right? If you're buying a house, same thing. It's never used, right? If I'm buying a secondhand home, walls might be cracking or whatever, right? So the ideology is that the latest will carry through the best of evolution. But what I think that happens in China right now is because they don't have enough modern history to go back to say, oh, certain amount of time within modern history, we have great stuff. The things in China, there is none, right?
Yeah.
So the reform only really started in late 70s, early 80s, right? So let's say early 80s when the reform actually started. People will only start to have money in the 90s. So from 90s till now, we only have 20 years, right? So our generation and our parents' generations, if you want them to look back and say, in your lifetime, what was great that you aspired to when you were a kid that you wanted to buy? They were like, dude, when I was a kid, all I wanted to be is to have food to eat. So how will they go back and say something from the 50s and 60s was great? It's very difficult. And this is why vintage car market in China wouldn't have the same impact as anywhere else because they don't have that history.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It's like,
do you know what I mean?
It's totally a culture thing because if you look
Yes,
at
it is.
Europe, even though Chinese history, it's like 5,000-6,000 years, right? But if you look at European history regarding art or things that are passed down through time, like heirlooms or whatever, if you study that history, you see a very consistent pattern of appreciation for art passed down through thousands of years. And you have that same thing with China. If you look back to some of the like court like vases or the chairs that are decorated with, and then the qipao, and then you see how they're sewing like metal strings, like gold strings or whatever, into the clothes. You really get a sense of just how crafty like people were back into the dynasties. But then during the Cultural Revolution and the Reform, the emphasis was placed on like communism and the greater collective well-being of the people. And
I think survival, probably.
Survival, exactly. Food, the basic pyramid of human needs. And people were condemned for appreciating these beautiful things by the government. And that's when you get a group of people who, in order to prove that they're doing well in life, they're looking forward to the newest thing, to get a sewing machine. That is a testament of you're doing pretty well in life, the 三大件. And then when you're going through the technological revolution in China, it was the 大哥大, it was the BBG, it was the newer, the better. The newer phone that you have, the better that you're doing in life. So it's like completely different. Whereas in Western countries or Europe or other places, it's like, yeah, we have that, but then there's also this consistent path of art appreciation that never was stopped or hampered by any political uprising. So that's why I think there's been like a break within Chinese culture, because Chinese culture is rich in history. It's just that once the revolution started, there's not much there for people to go back on.
I think what you're saying is there's a hiatus in Chinese history, which
Yeah, I think
just
so.
coincidentally coincides with the glory period for vintage watches. Right.
There's a hiatus in Chinese history that coincidentally coincided with this boom in modern tech development, where people didn't have time to pause and reflect on what was happening in the past 4,000 or 5,000 years, because we have so many new stuff introduced to us every single minute, every single day.
I think this is really highlighted in the Moonwatch story. Like 1969, you're talking about American moon landing. And then we're talking about that exact period in Chinese culture where everybody, that just wouldn't have been in the forefront of people's minds, right?
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's very much of a cultural thing. I still state that people are fundamentally the same because human nature is the same, right? It doesn't matter what your race are, the color of your skin, it doesn't matter. But culture shifts how you look at things, how your perception is, right? And Chinese as a collective, as a collective community, as a country of group identity, tends to have, I'm sorry to say this, but a very strong her mentality, right? So the her mentality, at least till today, is the latest is the greatest, because if you could consistently having the latest, it means you're doing very well.
Yeah.
If you haven't updated your car for 10 years, people's perception will be you're not doing that well. You did well 10 years ago, not today, right? So you have to keep up an image where you always have the latest thing. So latest is the greatest. Now, also, you have, I will say probably from the 40s all the way till the 70s, you have a 30-year of lost period, of lost history, right? Where again, like I said, people are basically trying to look in the food to put on the table, and the country is trying to find the path where it's going to go, right? Obviously, if it re-identified itself and it did really well in the past 30 years, but from the 40s and the 70s, it's very difficult for most Chinese. So again, if you're trying to market to the Chinese population between for a product that was made between the 40s and 70s, you're going to run into trouble because they do not understand the context of your product during that time. They do not understand the culture in the West during that time. And I mean, I remember, when Max was saying why, every time they were trying to explain to the Chinese about
Max Booster, yeah?
Yeah, Max Booster from NBNF was saying, we're trying to market to the Chinese, explain to them Star Wars, the connection between Star Wars and a lot of these Japanese anime to their watches. And the Chinese just don't get it. I'm like, of course they don't get it. When the Americans went to the moon, Chinese were still trying to figure out how to find their next meal, where their food stamps were, right? That they had no TV. They were cut off from the rest of the world. So how could they relate to what you're trying to sell? How could they relate to your story, right? And this is a part of the reason why sci-fi doesn't work in China. So if you look at Hollywood movies, sci-fi movies don't work in China. So if you look at Star Wars, right? Star Wars, both Star Wars and the MCU, Star Wars don't get a lot of box office hit and box office rating in China. But all of the Avenger movies do, right? And people puzzle, people are like, oh, it's the same thing. It's not the same thing. Star Wars is a sci-fi movie. It's talking about space. It's about exploration, right? Marvel movies work very well for the Chinese because they're special people with special powers. What does Chinese folk histories and folk storytellings, would tell you about ancient Chinese storytelling is ordinary, is extraordinary people with extraordinary godlike powers. That fits right into Chinese psyche. Right. So I think again, our time is up. But if you want to market and sell things in China, you have to come from Chinese context. You have to understand the culture and the history. Right.
So you kind of actually touched on my final question of this, fascinating interview, really. It's one of the two interviews with you where, to be fair, like, I don't think I said a lot. I don't think the other two girls have said a lot.
I was going to say,
yeah,
all three of us are just listening.
Silent.
Like,
Yeah.
So you kind of touched on it. As for you, in your opinion, what other problems do you see brands facing when they operate in China, and in particular for the independent brands, that they'll have to deal with before they actually have a chance at the China market? You kind of touched on one thing, which was you got to understand the culture and the context that you're marketing and communicating your product to. Are there any other things that you think are pressing issues?
Gee, well, I think the brands can really start to have some respect for the Chinese market. I say this with utter respect for all of the brands out there, but unfortunately, as a consumer, I don't really see how you're treating China as a important market as you say it is, right? I mean, look, let's all be fair. 60 to 70% of all watches are bought by Chinese. So, I don't really care with all your numbers that's been putting up on the statistics. Oh, like 17% of all these official export goes to US, 14 to Hong Kong, 13 to China. Come on, let's all be honest. Most of those products that goes into the Europe, United States, Japan, Singapore, wherever, Australia, is bought by Chinese tourists. And that's why in all these shops, there's always a Chinaman in there, because that person can speak Chinese and sell products to tourists. Okay? Now, the way I see it is, why not have all these allocations for China so people don't have to travel overseas? Well, I know because the tax in China is really high. So once they work out, there isn't enough margin in it, right? So they actually prefer people to travel around and buy. Okay, that's number one. Number two, maybe they don't really want to show the rest of the world that, oh, it's Chinese that's fucking keeping our factories' lights open. Maybe, I don't know, right? And then number three, do they really understand China? Do they really have proper infrastructures and proper teams and willing to invest in these teams in China, right? I mean, most of the time, China is super fast-paced, right? And we have friends in Switzerland in the brands. Things don't happen very quickly in Switzerland. You know what I mean? Like one phone call, a couple of emails, it's going to take ages, right? In China, like if we work on that pace, somebody's either going to jump off a window or somebody's going to get fired. Do you know what I mean? But I can respect the culture is things take time. Things takes procedures. I respect that. But I also think that maybe the Chinese division maybe needs some sort of autonomy, right? And also, I think after service is a big problem. After service is a massive problem. Now, most of the watches will have to go back to Switzerland. I think anything more than a 3-hand will have to go back to Switzerland, which is wrong. Okay, I think the brands needs to somehow come together and trying to work something on building a better after-service center or some sort of after-service service industry for the local Chinese market, so that when Chinese buy a watch, whether they bought it in China or outside of China, can at least be fixed within China, right? I mean, who is going to wait 7 months for a turnaround on a watch? That in itself is a put-off. I will not buy another watch, right? Unless if I'm a watch connoisseur, and I think it's okay because I have 12 watches and one watch goes back to Switzerland isn't that big of an issue for me. But if I only have 2 watches that is an issue, isn't it? Not to mention, if I bought a watch outside of China, there's no way for me to legally export the watch for service, right? I have to find somebody to bring it to Hong Kong or Macau, and then from Macau, send it to Switzerland and go back to Hong Kong, and I physically go there to pick it up. That is nonsense, right? So I think the brands needs to come together to properly educate the culture in China, and two, stop calling watches as a investment. Watch, just like anything else in life, will lose its value over time. If you somehow make money out of a watch, it's like winning jackpot, right? It shouldn't be the norm. And three, do a proper after service. And I think that's the three things.
Okay. Well, I mean, as you know from the podcast, we do a quick fire, Kelvin. So we're going to go into that now. All right. Give us some Oz words that only exist in Oz, like bludgeon or something. Give me a few more.
Crikey. Crikey.
Right. Yeah. What does that mean?
It means like, oh shit. Oh, something.
Yeah. Okay. Give me another one.
Whoa. Fair dinkum.
What's fair dinkum?
Oh, you're fair dinkum, mate. Fair dinkum means, it's good. You're good. Top.
Top bloke. Top guy.
No, not top bloke. It's not like a person per se. So like you say, like this thing is fair dinkum. So it's just like, okay, that's
pretty
good.
Cool.
Pretty cool. Okay, it's good.
Right. I like Arvo.
No,
see you in Arvo
is a way for Australians lazy slang. So you basically have the first couple of syllables, and the first vowel you hit, you chop it at the end, and you put an O. So afternoon, right?
Yeah.
You chop it in the middle. First couple of syllables, Arvo. Right. So
Arvo.
So what would morning be?
Morrow.
No.
Well, morning will actually just be good day, actually. Get it. And even with good day, they couldn't be bothered to pronounce D. So it's just G day. So good day.
Good day.
Oh my
God. Good day. Good day, mate.
Good day, mate.
Good day, mate.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that education, Australian education. Right. Number 2, what advice would you give to young people looking to succeed? One advice.
Look, I would say, okay, look, man, you're asking like top difficult philosophical questions. You have to define. No. Look, I have to dive into this. Okay, I felt compelled. I'm sorry, I felt compelled to dive into this. First, you have to define what is success, and I think in today's world, the driven by consumerism, it's been skewed. So people feel like the only thing to look out for in life is to have money. So success equals to having money. Now, fundamentally, I think that is wrong. Okay, I think that is wrong. If your aspiration, if the only thing you aspire in the world is to have money, then I think your life is pretty pathetic. Right? Because there's so many things in life that you have to you have to step back and look at life, and you think there's a lot of beauties in the world that might not cost money. And some of these are the most precious things in life. Right? But I would answer that if, let's say, for example, you want to make money, and you want to make money the legitimate way. Okay, so none of these hypothetical kind of situations. I would say that have a long-term vision and stick to it. Know where you're going. Have a very clear mind. Never doubt yourself. Have a very clear mind on exactly where you want to go. Now, you might take, like the role you might take, crossroads and all that sort of stuff. might be all different, and you might take unexpected turns, but you need to always be very clear exactly where you're going to be end up, right? And I'm not talking about making $1 million. Is if you have a goal in a business, let's just say you're in the business of making a restaurant, and your goal is I'm going to be the best dim sum restaurant in Shanghai, and that is your goal, right? And I'm telling you, if you're the top dim sum shop in Shanghai, you're going to be making a lot of money, right? But if you're starting the business thinking I'm going to make a lot of money in dim sum, then I think eventually you're going to find all sorts of weird ways trying to make money, but you're losing your focus. That is what makes your product special. So, so again, you have to have a long-term vision, stick to it, and perseverance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I think but still, I still think that people's value should not be in simple success. But anyway,
I think the first part
actually,
I think that first part was good advice. Like the first part could have just been on that, really. Just put that question in people's head. Like, what do they think?
Well, I think you could cut the rest off. I think would have been fine.
Yeah. Number 3, easier. Everyone loves Wagyu steak, and you're a bit of a dry aged expert. What's the main trick? What's the key part to dry aging for you?
Oh, well, finding a good fridge. Finding a good fridge is very important. No, I'm serious, because for dry age, for proper dry age to happen, right? And this is why dry aging is expensive. Is you have to have a fridge at a certain temperature. Okay, that's not the difficult part, but you need to have air circulation. So you can't just have a couple of pieces of meat stuck in a fridge and that's it. You have to have constant air circulation in it, right? Which means a lot of these dry age fridges that you see in the restaurants, they're not actually proper dry aging. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, you need to find a moisture level that fits your taste and your time frame. So for me, let's say, for example, all of my T-bone. So I do the entire loin section. Now, I do all my dry age for more than 75 days, right? So for me, I keep the moisture level at about 55%, and that seemed to work for me. The longest dry age I've ever done is something like 180 days. That's a really funky flavor. But you probably need to put some sort of like it takes a lot of nurturing, because the moment you start seeing molds coming up, you need to add a bit of vinegar and you have to wipe it off. So it's almost like growing a plant, right? So
I need to go over and have some. It's been a while. Have you still got some? Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
All right, cool. Number 4, what's the best cut of beef that you like?
The best cut of beef?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there is no best. They all great. But look, everybody is into ribeye, right? Now, I'm not a massive fan in ribeye. Personally speaking, the porterhouse is the best, because you get the best of both worlds. You get tenderloin and you get sirloin, right? But yeah, I would say my personal favorite is still a porterhouse. Then a ribeye, and then I do an amazing barbecue rib. So yeah, ribs.
Yeah, he does do a good one. Yeah. Right. Number 5, the next brand you'll move on to after Urwerk.
Ooh, I would say move on to, because I don't think.
Okay.
I don't think
the next brand that you're looking into.
All right. This is gonna sound a bit odd. But I probably think the next brand, as a brand, I will go into is I know it's going to sound really, really silly. But
Can't wait for the answer.
What is it?
Yeah, can you just
like
tell us,
how-
bro?
all right. What if I was going to say that I've got this crazy dream, some sort of idea, is that on every Shanghai Watch Festival, we release a batch of specially created crazy pieces.
Uh-huh.
Like, it could be like with various watchmakers and industries, or like students designed it and we made it. And it may not be expensive. It may not be like
like a
movements,
DB28
like
custom.
yeah, but it's something that's created for a bit of fun. And it's created by the Federation of Shanghai Watch Festival. I kind of think that's fun because every time it's different.
Okay. So it's almost like a unique piece that's related to the festival every time, yeah?
Yes, something
Okay.
like that. But that in itself carries a brand. But I guess the brand would have been Shanghai Watch Festival. So, yeah.
Or the brand that actually makes the watch.
Or the brand that will make a watch, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Number 6. What's your dream car?
Oh,
Yeah.
my absolute dream car is a McLaren F1.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
That's
You do. You really like McLarens, man, because like you really like them.
No, I don't. Well, I mean the modern McLarens don't speak to me as much. But the McLaren F1 is my all-time grail. If I
Which
had
are they
$20
selling
million,
for? 20 million.
Okay. When I was buying my Diablo, no, hypothetical again, right? Hypothetical again. So I know one for sale, one for sale in Australia transacted for $1 million. So originally that car was brought into Australia and bought by the CEO of Coca-Cola, Amatel, in Australia. Then he sold it to a gentleman who owns a steel recycling business. He sold that car for $1 million Australian dollars. And at that time, everybody thought the guy was mad. Like, why the hell would he pay $1 million on a car? And it's specifically a McLaren, because he could have bought Ferraris, for that kind of money. And I think for the next 4 or 5 years, the F1s were really struggling to find buyers. Price fluctuated a lot. I think the cheapest at one particular point was like $900,000 or something. And then something happened. Right now, if you can find one, they'd be in the range of $18 million. Yeah.
How much?
So
18
million.
Yeah.
only 63 roll cards ever built.
Yeah,
So,
it's one of those classic stories of something that wasn't popular, and then because it wasn't, the rarity's there, and then you get later
That's
admiration. You see the
Daytona.
same thing in watches. I mean, typically with Patek.
Look, the McLaren F1. I mean, as a car, there's a lot of problems with, but the story behind the car is amazing. The story of building the car is amazing. It's the first car and probably the only car that basically started with a blank check. The designer could put anything he wanted in it, could do anything he wanted with it. No accounting department would have gone into his office and said, no, we don't want this, we can't do this, we can't do that. It was a dream come true. It was literally a dream come true, and happens to be Gordon Murray, right? And McLaren, that has won all these Formula Ones back in their heydays. And then it was the first car that went to racing the first time, and it won Le Mans. And I think they got first, third, fifth, 7th, and 13th. I was 11th or 13th. So 5 cars not only finished got places, and they won. So that's amazing, you know. I think the achievement and the story behind it is amazing.
Okay. Right. The next one. Mahjong or 斗地主?
Oh, 斗地主 for sure.
Oh, okay.
Be,
right.
be the landlord for sure.
Do you know? Do you girls know how to play that? 斗地主.
No, what is it? Is it
No, it's not. It's
No.
It's played with two sets of cards, and it's very typically Shanghainese. Like it's played everywhere in Shanghai. Yeah, they don't play Lao Da here.
Yeah.
You see, the reason I don't like mahjong is because I think mahjong is a certain Chinese mentality that I hope within the next couple of generations we don't have anymore. And I like 斗地主 because 斗地主 has a certain mentality that I kind of hope Chinese would develop into. Okay, mahjong is a game that every man for themselves. You have 4 players.
Oh yeah.
You do not cooperate with one another.
Yeah.
Right. You fight among each other. Now, how do you win the game? How do you win the game? There's 2 types of winning. There's only 2 outcomes. The best case scenario is you win, right? So you either take somebody else's money because that person lost, it lost to you, or you win in a way that everybody pays you, right? So that's one type of winning. Another type of winning is you got such shit cards, you know that there's a high possibility that you might lose, but the best outcome for you, like okay, so you know you're not going to win. You know you're not going to win, or there's a very small chance you're going to win. So the next best thing to do is sabotage the game so no one else wins.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I think, now I'm not saying there's a problem in Chinese culture, but I think, you know, in our culture, if there is some sort of resemblance of that game in our culture, in how people dealing things, thinking about things, I hope we could eradicate that. Now, 斗地主 is same, 4 people playing cards, 2 deck of cards. The landlord gets 8 extra cards from the deck, and it's 3 people cooperating to beat the landlord, but they don't know what each other's cards are, so they have to guess. They have to, so they have to guess each other's cards, and they have to play in cooperation.
Have to work together.
You have to work together. So I think this is also the game sets in a way that, so you have 3 workers. You have 3 workers that fight the landlord, right? As long as one of the workers wins, the workers wins. So it's almost teaching a philosophy in that game, at least, that you might have to sacrifice yourself so that your teammates can win, because as long as your teammate wins, you win.
You win.
So I think if you look at business, if you look at career path, family, even, you know, a lot of our cultural issues, if we could put that game in place into people's mindset, I think China would have been a lot more a much better place than mahjong mindset.
Okay, the last one.
Okay.
What's the most annoying thing about Shanghai?
Oh, the most annoying thing about Shanghai is one of the things okay, let me rephrase. The most annoying thing about Shanghai is also the solution to the most annoying thing of Shanghai is the thing that I hate the most. So I'll say it like this. I hate Shanghai drivers. I hate the people driving in China. Right? I don't know how they get that license. And honestly, if shooting people was legal in China, I think I'll be shooting 10 people a day.
Hypothetically.
No. Not hypothetical.
Not hypothetical.
I will actually kill people. They can't drive. They cannot drive. Right? Now, So the solution for that, and honestly, I don't think it's better education or anything like that, because we're way beyond that. I think the best thing that will happen is autonomous driving. So you basically sit in the car, you press a button, the car will drive itself. But I mean, if I get into a car and I don't have to drive, and the car drives itself, I hope that doesn't happen in my lifetime. I mean, when I'm dead, they can do whatever they want, but I still like to drive my car.
Have you tried it on the Tesla in Shanghai?
Yeah, I have.
How is it?
On the freeway, it's okay, but don't trust autonomous driving for the time being, for sure. I mean, look, even Tesla's changed it. They don't call it auto drive anymore. They call it assisted driving, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, for China roads, it's very different to Europe. They don't have a scooter or a person, just jumping out of nowhere, right? So the road conditions are very, very different. The mindset's very different. And I also think right now you cannot train a computer to read intent, right? Like when I'm driving on the road, I could sort of figure out whether if that person in front of me is going to move into my lane, even though that person hasn't put a blinker on. But the movements, the maneuvers that he's making, I'm thinking, okay, in about 2 seconds, he's going to move into my lane, and then he's going to blink, right? And most of the time, you could sort of read these it's a driving intuition, but a computer might not be able to pick that up, right? Computers all about data. But then I guess if every single car is going to drive itself, then they can communicate with each other. Then I think it's fine. But right now, when you have like only 1% of the car that can do that, I don't think can be trusted.
Okay.
But on the freeway, it's fine.
Right. Well, we have to wrap up here. We've gone way past allocated time for both episodes, but I hope that there wasn't really a particular time that I thought was right to cut you off, because everything I thought was very much worth listening to. But yeah, it was great that you found time to do this, Kelvin. So thank you very much for that.
Oh,
it's my pleasure.
Although I know you so well already, I had a lot of fun. So thank you, everybody, to listening. And we'll see you on the next one. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Thank you for tuning in to the Waiting List podcast. Hit the subscribe button, and the next episode will come straight to your phone as soon as it's ready. Whilst I'm here, please remember to leave a nice review and follow us on Instagram at the Waiting List podcast.